The stars above Tessera shimmered in a calm, endless dance, yet, down on the planet's surface, chaos had found a home. The once bustling shuttle lanes were silent, save for the occasional wail of alarms from the ruined docking stations. A massive solar flare had erupted from a nearby star, disabling all communications and energy grids across the sector. In the aftermath, scattered ships floated like wounded birds, their crews stranded and desperate. Lieutenant Aaron Vale, a human medic with the Terran Starfleet, had been assigned to a neutral aid station on Tessera. The station was small, built more for repairs and medical aid than defense, but Aaron had learned to make it work. He had always been a calm presence, the kind of human who could step into panic and turn it into order. Yet even he had never seen anything like this. A distress signal blinked faintly on the comm panel, distorted and broken but unmistakable. It was weak, irregular, and carried the signature of a Royal Lithari shuttle. The Lithari were an alien species renowned throughout the galaxy for their strict codes, their radiant bloodlines, and their near-divine reverence for their royal family. No human had ever rescued one of them before. Most didn't even try. They respected the distance that the Lithari demanded. But Aaron didn't hesitate. He suited up in his medic's armor, a light, flexible exosuit with a minimal shield and life support, and climbed into a hovercraft. The flare had scorched the landscape, leaving metal debris jutting from the ground and clouds of ash drifting in the air. He navigated carefully, sensors pinging broken signals and floating hazards alike. Hours passed as he followed the signal, the silence of the ruined world pressing on him. He had no backup. He had no orders other than to aid whoever needed him. When he reached the crash site, the sight froze him for a moment. The Royal Shuttle had skidded across the jagged terrain, its hull scorched and smoking. One wing was crumpled, the other barely hanging. Inside, through the broken canopy, he could see the unmistakable form of a Lithari female. The princess, he realized immediately. Her skin shimmered faintly with bioluminescence, and a dark red stain spread across her chest. Her breathing was shallow, almost imperceptible. Aaron's heart tightened. Alien physiology was complex. The Lithari had a unique circulatory system, one that made their blood sacred, almost untouchable to outsiders. Human medicine rarely applied. And yet here she was, dying. He had no choice. He worked quickly, cutting through twisted metal with his plasma cutter. Sparks rained around him, but he ignored them. The princess's vitals were dropping. His sensors confirmed it. She had lost a critical amount of blood, and alien medics would have called her beyond saving. But Aaron had something they did not. He activated the nanite infusion system built into his armor. These were tiny machines developed by Terran scientists to repair tissue at the cellular level. They were designed for human use, but Aaron had spent months studying their applications on alien biology. The Lithari were difficult. They rejected foreign blood chemically, but the nanites could act as a bridge. He took a deep breath. The protocol was dangerous. Linking his bloodstream directly with hers could kill him, or worse, fail and doom her anyway. But there was no hesitation in his mind. Duty, honor, and instinct pushed him forward. He pricked his vein and let the nanites flow. Warm metallic energy hummed as the systems activated. Aaron placed his hand on her chest. The nanites scanned, adapted, and began the impossible, integrating his human blood into her alien system. His heartbeat synced with hers. Every pulse, every drop was a gamble. Minutes passed like hours. The shuttle's alarm shrieked and faded. Ash drifted through the broken windows. Aaron whispered softly, as if speaking could guide the nanites. "Stay with me," he said. "You're going to live." A faint shiver ran through her body. Her eyes fluttered open, revealing deep violet irises that shimmered in the dim light. Weakly she looked at him, not with fear, but with something that seemed almost like recognition. Aaron smiled, though fatigue pulled at his limbs. You are alive," she whispered, her voice soft and musical, broken by weakness. "Yes," he said simply. "You're going to be okay." The nanites worked tirelessly, repairing damaged vessels, stabilizing her heartbeat, and slowly restoring the bioluminescent glow to her skin. Sweat dripped down Aaron's forehead, his strength waning, but he refused to pull back. Finally, her vitals normalized, her breathing steady. Aaron sank to his knees, exhausted. The princess was safe, alive, against all odds, but the moment was fragile. He had done what no human had ever done before. The Lithari would not see it as simple heroism. They would see it as a violation of sacred law. Human and alien blood mixed. A human had touched royalty. In Lethari society, this was almost blasphemy. Before he could think further, a shadow fell across the shuttle. Figures approached the royal guards, their armor gleaming in the dim light. Weapons were drawn, though their movements were precise, not threatening at first. "Step away from the princess," one commanded. His tone was firm, but not cruel. There was fear in their eyes, too. Fear of what he had done and what might come next. Aaron stood slowly, hands raised. "I saved her. She is alive." The guards glanced at one another, uncertainty flickering. They were trained to protect, to enforce, to judge, but they had never faced a human like Aaron Vale. A deep voice rang out from behind them. The queen herself, tall and regal even in this ruin, stepped forward. Her eyes, sharp and calculating, studied him. "You dare touch the blood of my daughter?" she asked, her voice echoing like crystal. "Do you understand what this means?" Aaron met her gaze. "Yes, Your Majesty. I understand. But if I had not acted, she would have died." The queen's expression did not soften. Instead, it hardened like ice. Around them, the world seemed to pause. The cracked ground, the drifting ash, the fallen shuttle, all holding witness. "You have broken the sacred laws of the Lethari," she said slowly. "And yet, she lives." Her eyes flicked to the princess, who now sat up with difficulty, looking at Aaron with gratitude in her violet eyes. "This miracle is your doing," Aaron bowed his head. "I did what any human would do." The queen studied him, her gaze piercing. Humans were known for their unpredictability, their defiance of reason and tradition, and yet they also carried something rare: courage, empathy, and honor in equal measure. "You will come with me," the queen declared. "Not as a prisoner, yet not as free. You are bound to the palace until we decide your fate." Aaron felt a chill, though he did not flinch. He had expected no less. He had saved a princess, but in doing so, he had stepped into a world of ancient rules, where every action had consequences far beyond what humans usually imagined. As he followed the guards through the wreckage toward her hovering palace ship, he stole one last glance at the princess. She nodded at him, a small silent gesture of trust. He would not fail her again. The shuttle lifted, carrying them above the ruined surface of Tessera. Stars stretched in endless streams of light, distant worlds spinning in silent arcs. Aaron sat quietly, listening to the hum of the engines, thinking of the hours to come. He did not know what awaited him at the palace or how the queen would judge him, but he knew one thing. Humans had a way of surviving, of turning impossible odds into victories. And if a human could save a princess with nothing but courage, instinct, and a single lifeline of blood, then perhaps even the oldest laws could bend. Above them, the stars seemed to shine a little brighter. And somewhere deep in the galaxy, humanity whispered, "We are here. We endure, and we do not fail." The palace of the Lethari was unlike anything Aaron had seen before. It floated above the ash-choked plains of Tessera, a gleaming spire of crystal and silver, powered by anti-gravity fields that shimmered like liquid light. Inside, corridors were lined with glowing panels that pulsed in rhythm with the heartbeats of the royal family. Every step he took echoed in halls that had been walked by centuries of rulers, generals, and diplomats. And now he, a human, was walking among them, not as a guest, not as a visitor, but as someone who had broken sacred law. The guards led him to the central chamber, a vast room with a dome of translucent crystal. From above, the light of the planet below filtered through, bathing the room in a soft violet glow. At the far end, seated on a throne carved from the living crystal of Tessera itself, was Queen Illustra. Her presence commanded attention. Her long silver hair flowed like liquid mercury, and her eyes were sharp, calculating, and impossibly bright. Aaron stopped at the center of the chamber. He bowed his head, a small gesture of respect that seemed to irritate some of the Lethari nobles gathered around. The queen's voice echoed in the chamber. "You have done something no human or alien should dare," she said. "You touched the blood of royalty. You mixed yourself with what we consider sacred. Do you understand the gravity of your actions?" Aaron lifted his gaze. "Yes, Your Majesty. I understand. But the princess would have died without help. I could not stand by and do nothing." The queen's eyes narrowed. "You speak of duty and compassion, yet in doing so you violated laws that have protected my people for centuries. You have put us all at risk of scandal, of divine disfavor. The blood of a royal is not meant to be touched by outsiders? Aaron swallowed, steadying his voice. I did not touch her for power, for fame, or for reward. I did it to save a life. That is all any human or any being can do. A murmur ran through the chamber. The Lithari nobles whispered among themselves. Some were outraged, some curious. None had ever seen a human speak with such calm conviction. Most would have bowed, cowered, or pleaded. But Aaron remained still, unbroken, his resolve as clear as the crystal walls around them. Queen Alistra leaned forward slightly. And yet the princess lives. She owes her life to you. Tell me, human, do you think that absolves you of your crime? Aaron paused. He could feel the weight of the room pressing down, the centuries of tradition, the invisible threads of law and honor stretching toward him. I do not ask to be absolved. I ask only that she be safe. That is all I have done. The queen's lips pressed into a thin line. She had expected fear, maybe even defiance, but not this calm honesty. There was a moment of silence, heavy and full of tension, before she spoke again. You will be bound, she declared. You are neither free nor fully imprisoned. You will remain within the palace, observed at all times. You will learn our ways. You will answer questions when asked. And you will be tested. Aaron inclined his head. I will comply, Your Majesty. The Lithari guards led him to a section of the palace that looked like a library crossed with a laboratory. Walls were lined with strange crystals that pulsed with life, and machines hummed with unknown energy. A single chamber had been prepared for him, a translucent cell suspended above the floor with a bed, a table, and a small viewport that looked over the palace gardens. He could not leave, but he could see the sky and the light of the alien world stretching endlessly beyond the crystal walls. Days passed. Aaron was studied constantly. Lithari scholars observed his biology, his speech, and even his emotions. They took notes, ran experiments, and compared him to their ancient records. He answered their questions with patience, explaining human physiology, human culture, and human reasoning. Through it all, he maintained his dignity. He did not complain, did not beg, and never faltered. Slowly, the Lithari began to see him not as an outsider, but as something remarkable. The Princess Saren came to visit him daily. She moved with care, still recovering from the injuries that had nearly taken her life. Her bioluminescence flickered faintly, a sign that Aaron's blood had truly healed her in ways even her people could not fully understand. You saved me, she said one afternoon, sitting on a crystal bench in the garden. Her voice was soft, tinged with awe. I cannot begin to imagine what it must have cost you. Aaron smiled faintly. It cost me a little blood, some time, and a lot of worry. But it was worth it. You're alive, and that is enough for me. Saren's eyes shone. Most humans would never have tried. They fear the unknown. Aaron shook his head. Not all humans, some of us see a life and we do what must be done. They sat in silence for a moment, watching the strange, floating gardens of the palace. Even though Aaron could not leave, these visits became the highlight of his days. Through conversation, Saren learned about humans, how they value choice, courage, and empathy over rigid law. Aaron spoke of Terran history, of wars fought not for conquest but for survival, and of moments when a single human had changed the course of entire civilizations. Saren listened intently, fascinated. Your people. You do not seem afraid of making mistakes. Aaron tilted his head. Mistakes teach more than perfection ever could. And sometimes, the only wrong choice is to do nothing when you can act. Meanwhile, the Queen convened secret meetings with her advisors. The palace halls buzzed with whispers about Aaron Vale, the human who had dared to touch royal blood. Some nobles argued that he should be executed to cleanse the lineage. Others warned that the human's knowledge, courage, and nanites could be invaluable if the Empire faced danger. The Queen listened to all sides, weighing duty against pragmatism, tradition against survival. One evening, she summoned Aaron to the throne room. He stood at the center, calm and collected, awaiting her words. You have remained steadfast even under observation, she said. You have answered every question, complied with every request, and yet, you do not fear us. Most aliens would have trembled. Tell me, human, why do you not fear me? Aaron considered her question carefully. Fear is only useful if it teaches you something. If you are fair, just, and honest, there is no reason to fear. And if you are not, then fear cannot protect you anyway. The Queen's eyes flickered. No human had ever spoken to her with such candor. It was audacious, almost reckless, and yet undeniably honest. "You are bound here," she said finally. "But I am beginning to see that perhaps humans are not as simple as I thought. There is something in you, a strength, a clarity, a moral courage that I have not seen in centuries of ruling." Aaron inclined his head once more. "I am glad if I have impressed you, Your Majesty. But I did not come here to impress anyone. I came to save a life." Saren appeared silently behind him. Her eyes were bright, her aura flickering with gratitude. She stepped forward, her voice soft but firm. "Mother, he saved me. He risked everything. If we punish him, we punish the one who gave me life." The Queen studied her daughter. There was a tension between them, unspoken but powerful. The words of a child, or a young adult as the Lithari counted age, were rarely enough to sway her. But this was not just a child speaking. It was the future of the Empire pleading for mercy. "You speak with the wisdom of the living," the Queen said slowly. "But the law is still the law. You understand that?" Saren nodded. "I understand. But sometimes the law must bend for what is right." The Queen's lips pressed together. For the first time, doubt flickered across her face. She had ruled for decades, yet here was a human, a fragile, strange, courageous being forcing her to consider mercy over tradition. Aaron stood quietly. He did not push. He had done his duty. If the Queen chose punishment, he would accept it. If she chose freedom, he would continue to serve in whatever way he could. That was the human way. Act, endure, and let the consequences follow. Finally, the Queen spoke. "You will remain bound, but not without purpose. You will stay within the palace. You will teach, learn, and aid where you can. Your actions cannot be undone, and neither can the blood bond you have formed. But perhaps there is something here that can be built from it, something greater than punishment or reward." Aaron bowed deeply. "Thank you, Your Majesty. I will not fail you." And so the days continued. Aaron remained bound within the palace, yet he was far from powerless. He taught Saren, shared his knowledge with select scholars, and quietly earned the respect of those who had once looked upon him with suspicion. The whispers in the palace began to change, not of scandal, but of awe. The Queen watched from her throne, her mind turning over every word, every action, every detail of the human who had dared to save her daughter. She did not yet trust him fully, but she could not deny the undeniable. Aaron Vale was extraordinary. And in a world governed by rules older than the stars, that might be the most dangerous and powerful thing of all. The palace gardens floated like islands of color in the sky. Strange, glowing plants swayed even though there was no wind. Pools of liquid crystal reflected the violet sky, and soft lights hovered like tiny stars bathing the gardens in a gentle glow. Aaron Vale, still bound by the Queen's command, spent hours in these gardens each day. His cell overlooked them, and he could move freely within its boundaries. He often sat quietly, observing the beauty, letting his mind wander, and thinking about the decisions that had brought him here. The days had become predictable in a strange way. Scholars came and went, examining his blood, questioning him about human technology, human habits, and human thought. They were polite, curious, and cautious. The Lithari had never faced a creature, like Aaron, someone who could endure scrutiny without fear or complaint. But the most important visits were those from Princess Saren. At first she had come hesitantly, aware of the protocol, aware of the whispers that ran through the palace. She had expected a human to be weak, frightened, or submissive. What she found instead was someone steady, calm, and quietly courageous. He did not boast. He did not demand. He simply was, a being who had risked himself to save her, and who had done so without expectation of reward. "Good morning, Aaron," Saren said one day, her voice soft as she entered the garden, her glowing hair shimmering in the ambient light. She approached his cell carefully, pausing at a respectful distance. "Are you well today?" Aaron looked up from the book of alien anatomy he had been studying. "I am well. The human body can endure more than most would expect," he replied with a small smile. "And you?" Saren seated herself on a floating bench nearby. "I am recovering, slowly. The doctors say I will regain full strength soon, but I can feel the difference already. Your blood helped me more than any medicine could." Aaron shook his head. The nanites did most of the work. My blood was only a bridge. You healed because you fought to live. Saren considered this. Humans, you value life in a way that seems simple yet powerful. My people worship laws, traditions, and history. We forget sometimes that life itself is precious. Aaron closed his book. Laws are important, yes, but they are not life. If a law prevents you from saving a life, then perhaps the law needs to be reconsidered. She looked at him thoughtfully. You speak boldly for someone who is bound and observed. Aren't you afraid? Aaron leaned back against the crystal wall. Afraid is useful only if it helps you act wisely. Fear without purpose is wasted energy. I am here to save lives, to teach, and to learn. Nothing else matters. The princess studied him in silence. There was a subtle courage in humans she had never seen in the Lithari. The elders spoke of humans as unpredictable, emotional, fragile creatures. But Aaron was neither fragile nor uncontrolled. He was focused, precise, and kind. A combination that left Saren in awe. Over the following weeks, their conversations deepened. Saren asked about human history, about wars fought and won, about cities built from nothing, about times when a single human had changed the course of civilizations. Aaron answered patiently, telling her stories not as tales of conquest but as lessons in courage, empathy, and perseverance. You humans, you do not seem afraid of mistakes, she said one evening, as they watched floating lanterns drift across the gardens. Most of my people fear failure so much that they hesitate to act at all. Aaron nodded. Mistakes teach more than perfection ever could, and sometimes the only wrong choice is to do nothing when action is needed. Saren smiled faintly. I see now why you risked your life for me. A human would act even when others hesitate. You are remarkable. Aaron shrugged. I did what anyone would do. But thank you. Their bond grew. It was not romantic, at least not yet. But it was profound. Saren began to understand humanity in a way her people never could. Aaron began to understand the Lithari, their devotion to duty, their reverence for life, and the weight of tradition they carried. Yet the palace walls were never silent. Whispers continued to circulate among the nobles. Some called him a miracle worker, others called him a threat. A few argued that his presence might endanger the royal line, that his blood could alter Saren in ways unforeseen. The queen, ever watchful, noticed these murmurs and kept her attention on Aaron. One day Saren asked him a question that had lingered in her mind. Aaron, do humans always act this way? Selflessly? With honor? He paused, thinking carefully. Not always. Humans can be selfish, greedy, or cruel. But when we act together, when we choose to do what is right rather than what is easy, we can achieve incredible things. That is why my people survive in a galaxy that often underestimates us. Saren nodded. Your people, they are admirable, and yet, here you are, bound like a prisoner. I cannot understand it. Aaron's gaze drifted toward the floating horizon. Tradition can be powerful, princess. Sometimes it is more important to follow rules than to see the truth. But rules are made by people, not the stars. And people can learn, grow, and change. It was during one of these quiet conversations that Saren noticed something extraordinary. Her energy, once faint and weak after the accident, now pulsed stronger than before. The glow of her veins had a subtle warmth to it, a faint resonance that seemed almost human. She realized then that Aaron had not only saved her life, he had left a permanent mark, one that intertwined their existence in ways even the queen could not fully measure. You have changed me, she said softly, almost to herself. Aaron looked at her. No, you changed yourself. I only helped. Despite her gratitude, Saren faced a dilemma. Her people might never accept this bond, and the queen's judgment remained a looming shadow. Even though Aaron was bound and observed, he was no longer just a prisoner. He was a symbol, a living challenge to centuries of tradition. One evening, As the sun dipped behind the violet clouds of Tessera, the Queen summoned Saren to her chamber. Saren returned to Aaron later, her expression troubled. The Queen, she questions you. She cannot forget that you touched royal blood. Some of the council insist that the bond is dangerous. They fear what it could mean for the future of the Lithari. Even if they do not act, the whispers continue. Aaron nodded calmly. I expected nothing less. Tradition resists change. That is its nature. But fear, suspicion, and law are no match for courage and truth. Saren looked at him, frustration mixing with admiration. You speak as though you are free, and yet you are bound. How can you endure it? Aaron's eyes were steady. Being bound does not mean being defeated. I am bound, yes, but my mind is free. My actions, where I can choose them, are free. And that is enough for a human. Their bond strengthened in those days. They spoke of hope, of the galaxy, of what it meant to be a ruler, and of what it meant to be a human. Aaron taught her to question assumptions, to value compassion over mere obedience, and to trust in the strength of her own choices. The palace began to notice subtle changes in Saren. She moved with renewed confidence, spoke with more authority, and considered actions not solely based on law, but on what was right. A human, a bound prisoner, was reshaping the future of an empire without a single command, simply through wisdom, patience, and courage. The Queen observed quietly, her thoughts conflicted. Aaron had broken law, yet he inspired growth. He had touched blood, yet he healed. He had risked life, yet he showed no fear. Each day she found herself torn between anger at tradition's violation and admiration for the human strength. And Aaron, ever patient, continued to endure, teach, and inspire. He had no desire to rule, no need to rebel, no wish to seek revenge or power. His strength came from simplicity, the courage to act rightly, the willingness to sacrifice, and the wisdom to endure. By the end of the week, the palace had begun to shift subtly. Some nobles began to question their rigid adherence to old rules. Others whispered that perhaps humans were worth understanding, not fearing. And Saren, she no longer saw Aaron as a mere human. He was a teacher, a companion, a reminder that life and courage mattered more than tradition or law. One evening, as they watched the violet sunset over Tessera from the floating garden, Saren spoke quietly. Aaron, the future is uncertain, but I am glad you are here. I do not know what the Queen will decide or what others will think, but I am glad you are here. Aaron smiled faintly. The future is always uncertain, but we can choose how we face it, and we can choose to act rightly. That is all any of us can do. The palace of the Lithari was a place of order, of tradition, and of unyielding law. For centuries, the throne had been a symbol of divine authority, its occupants bound by rules older than memory. Yet now, a single human, Aaron Vale, had disrupted centuries of balance. His calm courage, his quiet defiance, and his unshakable moral clarity had begun to ripple through the empire in ways the Queen could not ignore. Queen Illustra stood at the center of her council chamber, her eyes fixed on the glowing map of Tessera below. The storm of whispers, reports, and petitions that had reached her in the past weeks weighed heavily. Nobles demanded punishment for the human, claiming he had tainted the royal bloodline. Advisors warned that his knowledge, his nanites, and his courage could be dangerous if left unchecked. And yet the princess, her daughter, spoke only of gratitude, respect, and hope. The Queen had never faced such a dilemma. For centuries, law had been absolute. To act outside it was unthinkable. Yet here was a human, bound not by fear but by honor, who had risked life to save another, and who had inspired the very heir to the throne to question her own people's blind adherence to tradition. The human remains in the palace, one advisor said sharply. If we allow this, it sets a precedent. Others may believe they can break the laws, claiming noble intent. The empire cannot survive such recklessness. Queen Illustra's voice was steady, measured, but filled with gravity. And yet he has not broken the empire. He has saved it. The princess lives, and his presence inspires more loyalty and courage than many of our own officials. Another advisor frowned. Your Majesty, you speak of inspiration. But his blood, it touched the princess. The royal line is sacred. Even if she lives, can we be certain her purity is intact? The queen's eyes narrowed. She had considered this carefully. The human's blood had not corrupted the princess. It had healed her. And yet perception mattered as much as reality. The Lithari people were proud, traditional, and deeply reverent of bloodlines. One misstep could spark rebellion, doubt, or worse. She turned her gaze toward the window, toward the gardens where the human sat quietly, teaching Saren about human history. His calm presence, his simple dedication, and his unwavering courage made a subtle argument more powerful than any speech. Humanity was not a threat. Humanity was a force for good. Perhaps, the queen said slowly, we have underestimated humans. They survive where others fail. They act when others hesitate. They do not fear what they do not understand. One advisor scoffed. Underestimation is dangerous. His abilities are unknown. He possesses nanites, knowledge of Terran medicine, and a courage that borders on recklessness. We cannot predict what he might do. The queen folded her hands. Perhaps we cannot predict him, but perhaps we do not need to. Perhaps we need to observe, to learn, and to act with wisdom rather than fear. Meanwhile, in the palace gardens, Aaron and Saren continued their quiet lessons. Saren's energy had returned fully, stronger than before the accident. The nanites had integrated with her biology in a way that had enhanced her resilience, subtly strengthening her systems without altering her mind or spirit. She practiced controlling her bioluminescent glow, learning to channel it with precision, while Aaron taught her about human problem-solving, leadership, and morality. You are different from any being I have known, Saren said one day. You teach without command, guide without judgment. You inspire without authority. How is it that humans can be so strong? Aaron smiled faintly. Strength is not in authority or tradition. Strength is in choice, in courage, in the willingness to act rightly even when it is difficult. Humans have learned this because we often face impossible odds. The only way to survive is to be brave and to help one another. Saren looked at him with admiration. Your people, they are remarkable, and yet you remain calm even when bound. I do not understand it. Aaron's gaze softened. Being bound is not the same as being defeated. My mind is free. My choices are free, and I will act wherever I can. That is enough for a human. Back in the council chamber, the queen weighed her options. The whispers of dissent were growing. Some nobles spoke openly now of rebellion, of removing the princess from Aaron's influence, of asserting that human interference must be punished. Others argued that the human's courage and knowledge could strengthen the empire if guided properly. The queen realized that her next decision would define her reign. To punish Aaron could appease the council temporarily, but would risk the respect of the princess, the loyalty of those inspired by courage, and the subtle shift of thought his presence had already begun. To release him fully could set a precedent for change that might challenge the very foundations of Lithari society. She summoned Aaron to her chamber. He entered calmly, bowing his head in respect. You have endured much, the queen said, her voice steady but thoughtful. You have been bound, observed, and tested. Yet you remain calm, patient, and honorable. You inspire loyalty not by command, but by action. Why? Aaron met her gaze. I do what I can. I act rightly. I help those in need. That is all any human can do. Fear, law, or consequence does not matter as much as what is right. The queen's eyes flickered with something almost like admiration. And you would act the same way even if the consequences were death? Aaron nodded. Yes, if saving a life is worth the risk, then the risk is small. Courage is not the absence of fear. It is the willingness to face it for what matters. The queen considered his words in silence. They were simple, yet they carried a power that few of her advisors could match. Aaron's human clarity of thought, his calm bravery, and his unwavering morality were forces in themselves. Meanwhile, whispers in the palace grew louder. Some nobles began to see Aaron not as a threat but as a teacher. Others feared him more than ever. His presence, his calm, and his moral courage were changing the very way the Lithari thought about leadership, duty, and life. One evening, Saren approached the queen. Mother, he is not a threat. He has saved my life, taught me, and inspired me to see what is right beyond tradition. I do not ask you to forgive him but to understand him. That is all I ask. The queen studied her daughter, seeing the confidence and clarity that had returned to her since Aaron's arrival. She realized that the princess was no longer a child blindly following tradition. She had begun to think for herself, to act with wisdom, and to value courage over law. Your words are wise, the queen said slowly. And yet, the council will not accept this easily. They fear what they do not understand, and you have been changed by him, Saren nodded. Yes, but I see the truth, mother, and I trust my judgment. He is a human, yes, but he is honorable. He has shown us what courage, sacrifice, and compassion truly mean. The queen sighed, a rare gesture of vulnerability. For centuries, she had ruled with authority, fear, and respect. She had believed that the strength of a ruler came from the unwavering adherence to law. Yet now, standing in the midst of whispers, reports, and cautious observation, she realized that strength could come from something else entirely. Courage, honesty, and the quiet power of someone willing to act rightly against all odds. She made a decision, one that would not yet be public. Aaron would remain bound, yes, but his presence would no longer be treated as purely a transgression. He would be allowed to teach, to guide, and to act where his wisdom was needed. She would observe him carefully, but she would no longer treat him solely as a prisoner. This decision did not end the tension. The council would continue to watch, the nobles would continue to whisper, and the empire itself would face a subtle shift in thought. But the queen knew that Aaron Vale, the human who had saved her daughter, had already begun to change the Lithari forever. In the palace gardens, Saren returned to Aaron with a quiet smile. Mother has made a decision, she said. You will remain bound, but not without purpose. You may teach, guide, and act where you can. You are still observed, but you are no longer only a prisoner. Aaron nodded, a faint smile on his face. That is all I could ask. I will do my best. They continued their lessons, their discussions, and their quiet moments together. Each day Saren grew stronger in mind and spirit, guided by human courage and wisdom. And each day the whispers among the nobles changed. Not all, but enough to hint that perhaps the laws of tradition could bend when faced with truth and courage. And through it all, Queen Illustra watched. She had faced her dilemma and chosen a path that balanced law with wisdom, tradition with courage. Aaron Vale had not only saved her daughter's life, he had shown her a new way to lead, to see, and to act. The palace, the gardens, and the empire itself were shifting. The queen knew that the days ahead would be challenging, that some would resist, and that difficult choices awaited. But she also knew this undeniable truth. Humans, when guided by courage and honor, could inspire greatness even in those bound by centuries of tradition. The palace of the Lithari had never been quieter, and yet never more tense. News had come from the outer sectors. The Empire's sun, Tessera's own star, was showing signs of instability. Ancient records indicated that if its energy cores destabilized, the entire planet and its floating palace cities could be destroyed. Panic rippled quietly through the council. But Aaron Vale, the human who had already defied law, tradition, and expectation, understood what this meant before most of the advisors had fully grasped it. Queen Illustra sat upon her throne, her expression unreadable. She had spent weeks weighing the human's influence, the council's fears, and the future of her empire. Now faced with a threat of unparalleled magnitude, she turned to Aaron. You have observed our systems, our technology, our life energies, she said. If the sun destabilizes, can you help us? Aaron met her gaze calmly. I can try, but I will need full access and your people's cooperation. The queen studied him. And if you fail? Aaron's answer was simple. Then we have done everything we could. But inaction guarantees failure. The room fell silent. Even the most skeptical nobles recognized the truth in his words. Courage, clear thinking, and willingness to act. These were not qualities that could be denied. No matter how old the law or tradition, Saren, now fully recovered, approached her mother and Aaron. Her violet glow pulsed steadily, a testament to the bond she shared with the human who had saved her life. Mother, she said, I trust him. He has taught me to act with wisdom, courage, and clarity. We can do this together. The queen nodded slowly. Very well. Human, you may act. Your work may determine the survival of our people. Aaron felt a weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders. This was more than just healing one person, more than inspiring a princess. This was the survival of an entire civilization. yet he remained calm. Humans had faced impossible odds before, and they had endured. He would do the same here. He stepped into the heart of the palace where the sun's energy systems were monitored. The technology was complex, far beyond any human system he had ever encountered, yet his understanding of nanites, energy flows, and adaptive repair made him uniquely qualified. He began analyzing the star's unstable energy patterns, his human mind working in tandem with alien systems that often seemed almost alive. The palace watched as he moved, guided the flow of energy with careful precision, and integrated his own nanites to stabilize key points in the system. It was delicate work. One wrong adjustment could overload a channel, causing catastrophic failure. Yet Aaron remained calm, adjusting, testing, and recalibrating with meticulous care. Hours passed. The palace gardens, the floating chambers, and the council waited in tense silence. The star pulsed ominously, casting red and gold light across the Empire's cities. The slightest mistake could cost billions of lives, yet every adjustment Aaron made seemed to bring balance. Slowly, subtly, the star's unstable flares began to stabilize. Finally, the monitors showed steady readings. The star's core was no longer at risk of catastrophic failure. Energy flowed smoothly, and the danger had passed for now. The council erupted in cautious cheers. The queen, though still reserved, allowed herself the slightest smile. "You have saved the Empire," she said quietly, "not with force, but with courage, wisdom, and skill. I underestimated humans, and I was wrong." Aaron bowed his head. "I did what I could. The Lethari and their people made it possible with their cooperation and trust." Saren stepped forward, her eyes bright with gratitude. "You are free now, Aaron, bound no longer. Your duty to the Empire is complete, and your bond with me is honored." The queen nodded, rising from her throne. "Aaron Vale, human of Terran origin, you are recognized not only as a hero, but as a valued ally of the Lethari Empire. Your actions have changed how we view courage, honor, and loyalty. You are free." The weight of chains, both physical and symbolic, fell from Aaron's shoulders. For the first time since arriving in the palace, he felt fully unbound, fully free. Yet he did not revel in it. Freedom had little meaning without purpose, and he had already found that purpose among these people. The council, initially wary, now regarded him with a mixture of awe and respect. Whispers of rebellion ceased. Nobles who had called for punishment now spoke cautiously of the human who had saved a princess and stabilized a star. The queen had made it clear: courage, wisdom, and moral clarity could transcend law. Aaron spent the following days teaching more than just science. He taught strategy, leadership, and ethics. He helped Saren understand how to balance duty with compassion, law with morality. He guided the council in decision-making that considered both tradition and innovation. Slowly, the Empire began to evolve, not through revolution, but through understanding, respect, and human example. Saren often visited him in the gardens, walking beside him rather than speaking through barriers. "Your people. You do not conquer with fear. You teach with care," she said. Aaron smiled faintly. "It is not about conquering. It is about survival, compassion, and courage. When you act rightly, others follow, not because they fear, but because they see the example." Saren nodded. "I see now why you risked your life for me. You do not act for reward or for law. You act because it is right," Aaron shrugged. "That is all any human can do." The queen observed quietly from her throne room. She realized that her empire had been changed forever. The human had not only saved her daughter and the star, but had introduced a new way of thinking. A way that combined courage, wisdom, and honor with compassion and respect for life. In time, the empire began to flourish in ways previously thought impossible. Decisions were made with a balance of law and moral clarity. Leadership was guided by courage as much as tradition, and at the center of this transformation was Aaron Vale, the human who had risked everything for one life, and through that act, had shaped the destiny of a civilization. The princess often reflected on their bond. "He saved me," she said softly to herself one evening, "and in doing so he saved more than just my life. He saved my people, my empire, and perhaps even my understanding of what it means to lead." Aaron, for his part, remained humble. He did not see himself as a hero, nor did he seek recognition. He only saw what humans had always known, that courage, honor, and compassion could endure even in the harshest of galaxies, and that a single person, acting rightly, could change the world. The queen approached him one day in the palace gardens. "Aaron Vale," she said, "you have taught us more than we could have imagined. I underestimated humans, and for that I am grateful. You are no longer bound in any sense. Your place is with us if you choose it." Aaron looked at her, then at Saren. "I have already found my place," he said simply. "Where I can help, teach, and do what is right, that is enough." Saren reached out, taking his hand. "And we are grateful. More than words can express. Humanity. And you have shown us what courage and honor truly mean." The sun set over Tissera, painting the floating gardens with colors that no human or Lithari language could fully describe. The Empire had been saved, a bond had been formed, and traditions had begun to bend in the light of courage. And somewhere in the quiet, between the glow of alien veins and the hum of floating energy, the galaxy had witnessed a simple truth, that humans, when guided by honor, empathy, and bravery, could inspire greatness beyond measure. Aaron Vale, the human who had once been bound, now walked freely, not just in the palace, but in the hearts and minds of an entire civilization, and the empire of the Lithari would never be the same again. The stars above Tissera twinkled, silent witnesses to a bond that had transcended law, fear, and even the bounds of blood. Courage, honor, and compassion had triumphed. Humanity had left its mark.